Joining me on the program from Te Wananga Ihorangi, Te Karere Scarborough. Kia ora, thanks so much for your time today.
Kia ora Andrew, me ngā kai whakarongo, mihi ana ki a koutou, mihi ana ki a koe, taku hoa.
Now, this issue isn't just an intellectual exercise for you. This is personal. This is where you whakapapa to. Ngapuhi are your people. Now, let me put this out there. You are not speaking on behalf of Ngapuhi. That actually is part of the problem. Is Ngapuhi is such a diverse iwi of many different hapū, many different sub-tribes, that finding somebody to talk on behalf of Ngapuhi, that's a very difficult thing to achieve, right?
Yeah, yeah. That is a very true statement there. As a matter of fact, if we could have found someone to represent all of the interests of all of the hapū, we may have been one of the first to sign.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
I think if you have a look at maybe what Sam had said historically, but you bring that through to today, there are a few different contributors to where we've got to, which is the largest iwi, over 125,000 of us now, who are represented through over 100 individual hapū. So these are hapū that have genealogical links, but have their own unique, distinct identities and histories, who, I'll give you a whakatauki. Ngāpuhi ko whāorau, Ngāpuhi of 100 holes.
Yeah.
Now, when you hear that for the first time, you think, what the heck does that mean? But if you think about a net is a single unit, actually, but it's 100 holes in the way that it works.
Yeah.
So Ngāpuhi were typically known for coming together for celebrations or coming together, for war.
Yeah.
However, those holes or those distinct units were always distinct units first and foremost. When my ancestors of Ngāti Hine, based on Kawati and that kōrero signed, they signed as themselves.
Yeah.
When my ancestors of Te Parafo, on behalf of Tiraro, signed, they signed on behalf of themselves.
Yeah.
And so the ability of the missionaries to engage all of those hapū leaders at that time was amazing. However, transplanting that idea of hapū identity, over 100 hapū, into this current time, into this treaty process, is really challenging.
I mean, we're putting it in the historical context. Back in 1840, there wasn't one representative of Ngapuhi who signed the treaty. There was a large group of people there gathering together at Waitangi, representing different hapū and various different sometimes rival interests in the north at that time. It's perhaps naive to think that nearly 200 years later that we can just go, oh yeah, just pick one, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. As we talk about some of the main factors now that have stopped us, about 10 years ago, there was a massive rehaul of the process.
Yep.
And what happened was Finlayson was like, let's have a look at doing something slightly different. And so essentially he put up two options to all of Ngapuhi. One option was we try and come under a single body of people that represent all of the interests, or we try and pursue. It ended up being not a separate faction, because this was my whānau, a separate way of pursuing, which was actually we want to deal with the government on a hapū basis, or maybe a slightly adapted version of grouping. So that process went through what it went through, and there was still no clear consensus for all of Ngāpuhi in that instance.
Yeah.
My own personal take and experience has been a couple different things. Number one, whilst the frustration of not having all of this massive asset base in the bank that we could have capitalized on, while there's a massive loss there, and while we're going to be talking about hundreds of millions in the eventual settlement, we could have been talking about billions now in an asset base. It's almost like a will in a family. Unless the family is ready to take on that will and to be able to manage all of those assets, I think sometimes it's better that it hasn't happened. Within that, if you have a look at that metaphor and different family members, some of my hapū has spent the last 15 years getting research ready, and they're ready to, if the Crown turned up tomorrow, they'd be ready to say, here are all of the historical claims, here's what's gone on for us, we're ready to negotiate. But the marae down the road, the hapū down the road, actually isn't in the same place. And so there is frustration even within the different hapū around readiness. So readiness to receive the money, to manage money can do funny things to families and
Yeah,
to
it
hapū.
can. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also readiness of the individual hapū to go through that process as well. And so, not rival siblings, but kind of a family that has different levels of readiness
Yeah.
is one of the contributing factors, and it's complicated.
I think the family will thing is a metaphor that a lot of people will be able to identify with. Now, I suppose a contrast to another iwi that you whakapapa to Tainui, of course, one of the first to get a treaty settlement and some wonderful things happening in that space with an asset base, but very different structurally as well with kingitanga and okay, we know who's in charge and there's procedures in place. Tainui kingitanga, a very different iwi than Ngāpuhi.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a look at Ngāi Tahu and Tainui, who were the major iwi that engaged with the Crown directly initially, um, with Waikato specifically, led by our Queen at that time. But with Robert Mahuta and the way that they were going forward, they said progress now means doing something now that'll benefit us long term. And I think I just saw a recent stat that said the Maori economy is over 100 billion, $130 billion now,
Yeah.
of which Waikato Tainui is a major kind of part or player in that asset base. But then it's a different history. The Kingitanga existed because Wiremu Tāmihana of Ngāti Hauā was like, we need another more similar structure that it can engage the Crown on.
Yeah.
And so if you track that history, there is a clear leadership structure that people signed up for, that hapū, that iwi were supportive of. There was another way of doing things,
Yeah.
and the benefits are there in the way that it has engaged with the Crown. For Ngāpuhi to do something like that, though, at this point, one of the critiques on the marae is we are bowing down to a Crown process.
Hmm.
We are bowing down to a process that doesn't speak to who we traditionally were. Where, if you have a look at Waikato Tainui, actually, they did go through that process on their own terms, in their own way, and so they can say, hand on heart, this is who we are.
Yeah.
For Ngāpuhi to do that now, it would be a reaction to we want money through the door, and for some people, they say that's too much of a loss of identity.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big issue: the identity, the Maori and the Pākehā way of doing things and finding a way forward. There are lots of sticking points. Probably the biggest one, the issue of sovereignty. Now, this is not just specific to Ngāpuhi, but perhaps in terms of a treaty settlement, this is where people are talking past each other in this regard. Now, I mean, you and I are not going to solve this issue in our kōrero today. However, it's heartbreaking, I suppose, to see the lost opportunity for your people, for Ngāpuhi, not to have access to the assets, to see some of the deprivation and some of the challenges that Maori in Northland are facing. Our largest iwi in New Zealand, and yet an indictment to all Aotearoa that there aren't better opportunities, better resources available for Ngāpuhi people. This is a tricky situation, but in many ways, Te Karere, it's too important not to get right.
Yeah, I mean, it starts off philosophically, which is, did Ngāpuhi cede sovereignty or not?
Yeah.
And I've been on many marae and heard lots of different versions of that. But I would say the general consensus of my people, the hapū that I am a part of, especially there in Poroti marae, actually the answer is no. No,
Yeah.
we didn't concede sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is the case, it becomes from philosophical, it becomes a practical thing.
Yeah.
And there is a question, would we rather be poor, but maintain that sense of autonomy?
Yeah.
Would we rather be in the current situation that we are in and maintain that sense of who we are and what our ancestors signed up for? Or would we rather tread a different path?
Yeah.
Now, critics of that perspective, and I hear the critics and I understand their perspective, would say, actually, you've already been a part of the system too long. Here is one way of looking at sovereignty and what was conceded to the government. Let's just get on with it. But at the core, at the heart of what's going on is the debate around sovereignty.
Yep.
And for many people, and these are people who, have not done doctoral theses, all the way to some of our most smartest thinkers. The typical consensus is if we do concede sovereignty, then we concede something that our ancestors never intended to.
Yeah.
Now, Sam Carpenter would have a different perspective on that as well, which is why I try and leave those conversations to people like the Waitangi Tribunal.
Exactly, and yeah, and sovereignty is an important part of it, but selling your birthright, throwing away your mana for money, these are big issues. And like we said beforehand, there's so many voices in this space. It is a complicated issue. You mentioned Sam Carpenter a few times. This is a question I asked him earlier in the week. In terms of the process, is it too optimistic to say that this is something that we could get resolution on by the bicentenary of the signing of Te Tiriti? By 2040, a resolution and resources for the people of Ngapuhi. Do you think that's possible, Te Karere?
By 2040, I think if we just sorted out what the process is, I think that would be a huge win. As I say, for my people in Poroti, where we are and the different hapū that we represent, would be ready tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we've spent the last 15 years doing that. Whether each of the 100 hapū would be there or not, I'm unsure.
Yeah.
However, what the previous Labour government did is they did put aside $150 million, which is sitting there and it's creating income as kind of the start of an asset base. And so for me, that was a really clever move to find in the interim a way of continuing to advance whatever future Ngāpuhi might have. So that 150 million has turned into, I think, 160 or 170 million over the last couple of years. And so there are other ways to try and manage the interim. But I know for me and my people, by 2040, we want to be long done. We want to be in to post-treaty settlement governance, and we want to be employing our own people in Poroti. We want to be really far ahead. I know that's our aspiration.
Yeah, well, so very much appreciate your perspective on this complex but important issue. Te Karere, kia ora, thanks for your time.
Yeah, tēnā tātou katoa.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.